Hello guys and welcome to my channel. My name is Dav. I've been a software engineer for about 15 years and this channel is about Solidity, Web3, React and everything that revolves mainly around the Ethereum blockchain and decentralized application development. Today the purpose of the video is to show you how to listen to some of the useful MetaMask events. It will enable us to properly update our frontend by displaying informative messages or displaying the proper UI element when the user disconnects from MetaMask, changes the current account, or changes the network. So let's jump right in. In the last video, we have seen how to connect to MetaMask. If you haven't watched that video, I'll put a link in the description. To start, I would like to refactor the code a bit. I think it would be nicer to detect the provider when the page is loading, so we could already give some feedback to the user if needed. For example, if no provider was detected, we could display a message to install MetaMask, and the connect button would not be available. So let's start coding. Let's first import the use effect hook, and let's create a new state for the provider. We can already initialize it with window.ethereum. Since that's the provider we expect. So let's write our use effect function that will initialize our provider. And we'll make use of the detect provider method again. That's it guys, and this function will run only once since the second argument is an empty array. Now let's create a second use effect function that will run each time the provider is updated. Now second argument will be the provider, so that this use effect function will run each time the provider is updated. In this function, we will just copy paste this bit of code here from the login handler. And we will also need to create a new state to let the user know if MetaMask is installed. In case we have no provider, that means MetaMask is not installed. So we need to let the user knows about it. For that, I will create a new state variable. And we will first initialize it with false. And here, if we have a provider, we can change it to true. And now we can update our UI with this new state variable. So we will display the button if MetaMask is installed. And if MetaMask is not installed, we will simply display a link to download MetaMask. And here we can provide the URL to download MetaMask. Now we can clean up the code a bit and we can test the resulting page. And here we will simply display a warning. Since we will be providing a link to install MetaMask in case the provider is not detected. Now let's check the resulting page. Now let's check if our page is still working, if we can still connect. Let's refresh the page. We have the button and not the link. And yes, it seems to be working still. Now let's check the case where the provider is not detected. That should be the case with the private window, private browser. So let's open the app here. And yes, we have a link. The button is not displayed and we have a link to go and install MetaMask. Now let's see how to register two events that are used to detect when the user changes its account or changes network on MetaMask, and how to update our UI to it. So let's go to our app component and we'll make use of useState and useEffectHook. So we only want our useEffectHook to be triggered when our isConnected state changes. Our provider is listening for some events to happen, so we need to register to those events. The two events we will be registering on are accounts change event and chain change event. So let's do it. Now let's create the two callback functions. And let's make those functions async. Now let's add our useEffect cleanup function so that we can properly remove the events we registered on. And now let's finish our callback functions. we can copy paste this snippet of code from here. If account length is 0, then we can log out. And if the account has changed, we can set the current account. We don't need to set this connected true again because we're already connected. Now let's handle the case when we change the network. And we will create, for that we will create a new state. And we'll simply set our state here. Let's also create a couple of more states for the provider and for the Web3 library, because we need to use them in different parts of our code. And let's set our state inside our own login function. And let's update our home component so we can display the current network we're connected on. Now let's test our application in our browser. So I'll refresh it. Okay, great. We see the account here and here. We see the current network we're connected on, which is Ropstein test network, which has ID 3, chain ID 3. So let's change the account for now. Okay, it's still changing properly. Let's go back to account 2. Let's change network now. And it's updated properly on Kovan, which is chain ID number 42. Okay, let's log out. And there is a mistake here, guys, so let's fix it now. the account is still showing up in the header, which is not good. So to fix that, we simply need, I think, on the logout function to set our state to null, current account state to null. And let's check out our application. So let's refresh. Let's connect. Okay, we are connected. Let's log out. And fine, we don't have the account displayed in the header, and we have our login component here. Everything's working fine. So the last thing I would like to improve is to actually display the current network name based on the chain ID. So let's check the MetaMask documentation for that. Here we are on the MetaMask documentation. So let's check the chain ID section. And here we see that each chain ID corresponds to a given network name. So let's implement that in our code. So I did a mapping between the chain ID and the network name as seen on the MetaMask documentation. So I will just copy paste that mapping here. And let's use it down here. We'll use it here. Let's use that function here. That's it. Let's test our application. So let's refresh. Let's connect. And perfect. We see here the name of our network, current selected network. Let's change it and update it properly. Let's log out. Okay, everything's fine.